Hello, and welcome back to Heating Electrification 21. We're so glad to have you joining us today. I was going to say good afternoon, but I also would like to say good morning. It was so exciting to see yesterday over our 300 participants who are joining us not only from NEEP's 13-state region, but across the country, from California to Alaska to Canada. So thank you so much for choosing to spend your afternoon or your morning with us. I'm Carolyn Sarno-Goldthwaite. I'm the Senior Director here at NEEP, and I'm really pleased that you could join us for day 2. If you, by chance, didn't have an opportunity to join us yesterday, don't worry, it has been recorded. It will be posted on our website soon, so you'll be able to capture or able to listen in and join us to learn more about policy and equity when it comes to heating electrification. So be on the lookout for that. It will be posted and put on our website. Please use the chat function. So chat in, let us know now where you're joining from, maybe a little lesson or something you took away from yesterday or what you're hoping to learn from today. So feel free to use that chat. For those of you who missed yesterday, boy, that chat was certainly robust yesterday. There was not only a lot of great discussion that was happening, but there was a lot of great connections that were made. So with that, feel free to put your email address in and make that connection with other folks. So chat in and let us know. So I'd like to first, before we move on for the day, I want to thank our sponsors. So thank you so much to our lead sponsors, Mitsubishi, Daikin, Trane, Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection, and our supporting sponsors, Fujitsu and Abode. So thank you so much for sponsoring this event. We really appreciate it. We'd also like to thank our subscribers. So these are all of the many subscribers. I know the text is really small, but you can catch it on our website. But these are all of our subscribers to our air source heat pump heating initiative. And thank you so much to our allies. This is our allies network. If you're not an ally, please consider joining us. If you were on the speed networking site, if you did speed networking yesterday, we're going to do that again coming up soon, specifically for our allies. So it's a great opportunity to get plugged in and get connected and to learn more about what's happening in our region. We also want to thank our funders and our state partners. We truly appreciate collaborating with all of our funders and all of our stakeholders, for without you, it wouldn't be possible to do the work that we do. Before we transition, I want to cover a couple of housekeeping items. In our ongoing effort to improve accessibility, both in our work and our events, we have enabled closed captioning. I know I have found that really helpful, when we're doing events or when I'm listening to others' events. If you don't want it or you find it distracting, you can always turn that off. If you have a question for any of our panelists or the moderators, please make sure you put that in the Q&A box, not in the chat. The chat is for our ongoing live discussion. So please make sure you put your questions and they will be answered by the moderators. And use that chat, as I said, put your email address in, type in now, let us know, say hello, where you're coming from, what you're hoping to get out of the rest of the workshop. And then also the agenda and the speaker bios will be posted just to save time. We're not going to go through who everybody is, but that's going to be posted in the chat. So keep a lookout for that. So it's great to see in the chat. I see Tom Belair chatting in, so it's great to see so many folks. So some folks that have been working with us, and then there's also a lot of new folks that are joining us. So if you're not familiar with NEEP, we are a 25-year-old energy efficiency nonprofit, a bipartisan nonprofit organization that spans, as I said, 13 states. We work from West Virginia to Maine, and we work in a variety of areas, not just on heating electrification, not just on air source heat pumps, which is what a lot of folks know us for, but we also work on public policy. We work on tools and resources to drive energy efficiency in the built environment, helping to support our communities and our states. We work on residential labeling, on building energy codes. That's one of my personal favorites. Not everybody loves codes. I love building energy codes. So we work in a variety of areas, topical areas where we have done collaborating with our stakeholders for the last 25 years. We are a small but nimble organization, and there's only 23 of us. And so at this time, I'd like to welcome on stage, join me on my virtual stage, David Liss. Oh, there he is. There is one of my small but mighty nimble colleagues, David Liss. Hello.
Hi. Good afternoon, Carolyn.
How are you?
Doing well, thanks. I'm excited to be back.
You paused for a moment. Are you not doing well, Dave? You're not excited about heating electrification? This is our 7th year?
Eighth. I think I got that wrong yesterday.
You got it wrong yesterday. Well, 7, 8 years. That's a long time and a lot of market transformation that's happened and in that time period. So it's great to see you, Dave. Dave and I like to say NEEP's 25 years old, Dave, as you know, and we both have been at NEEP for 15 years, and we both grew up at NEEP and started when we were 5 because we're both child prodigies. That is my joke that I've been sticking with lately, and I'm going to go with it. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Seem unsure. We're not sure. All right, everybody, have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us, especially those of you that are new to NEEP. Welcome. And Dave, take it away. Continue chatting in, folks. Thank you.
Great. Good to see everybody back for day 2. Again, I'm Dave List, Director of Technology and Market Solutions at NEEP, and happy to be sort of off the sideline. It was hard yesterday to be in the background so much. So good to be part of a panel today that really sort of touches on technology, program, policy, kind of all rolled into this discussion. So I'm excited. So just in terms of teeing up the panel, the region has really seen pretty impressive growth for heat pumps over the last 6 years, and going back to 2013, we were about 50,000, and this is sort of New York and New England. And just the most recent sales data for 2020, we're at 180,000. So really significant growth in this market, although it largely has been in the ductless configuration, and so systems that have not really been installed and designed to carry full load. And so it's certainly kind of the rule today, not the exception, that ductless heat pumps are often being operated with legacy fossil systems. And we're starting to see this slowly change with more and more systems being designed and installed to carry most, or if not all, of the building's load. And so this panel is really about the implications of this shifting market, and whether as a heat pump community, we want to accelerate this trend towards carrying most, if not all, of the load in a building, slow this shift, or reverse it. And so that's sort of like the key question of the panel today. And I have 3 panelists joining me, which I am really excited to welcome to the virtual stage. Christy Marrow with Cadmus, Steve Pantano with CLASP, and Monica Newcomb with the Department of Energy. And it's great to have you guys join us for day 2 and this panel. And we're just going to start off with kind of short self-introductions and a little bit of background, or the background you bring and perspective you bring to this conversation. And we'll start with Christy.
Yeah, thanks, Dave, and glad to be here. So Christy Marrow, I'm a mechanical engineer on the distributed energy resources team here at Cadmus. And I've been with Cadmus for about 6 years and in the energy efficiency space for over 10. And most of my career, I focused on commercial and industrial energy efficiency, but more recently transitioning into the building and transportation electrification program planning and evaluation space. So I'm here today because I'm currently serving as the project manager for a cold climate air source heat pump meter data study in the Northeast, focused on systems that are designed for whole home or primary with backup heating. And so when I refer to a whole home, we define those systems as those serving at least 95% of the home's heating load. So in those cases, the customer may have had an occasional wood fireplace going, mostly for ambiance, or a small electric strip heater in a bathroom or basement. And then for primary with backup, we define those as serving greater than 70%, but not full heating load. And in those cases, there was some sort of backup fossil fuel system on site, such as a furnace or a boiler. And those customers may have switched over to that backup heating system at certain outside air temperatures. And so we didn't include any supplemental systems in our sample, but we define those as being designed to serve at less than 70% of that home's heating load, which, as Dave said, is still the most common application in New England. So E for the Future is the primary funder for this study, but we've also received awesome support from MassCEC, NYSERDA, and the DOE's Building Technologies Office. And the main goal of this study is to collect and provide hard data and lessons learned that will hopefully support future residential electrification program design and implementation. So over the last year and a half, we conducted a mix of qualitative and quantitative data collection, including stakeholder and installation contractor interviews, online customer surveys, and heating and cooling season meter data for 43 homes across Mass and New York. So we're currently in the field wrapping up the last few meter removals from this past cooling season, and we're going to be incorporating that data into our analysis. So I'm really excited to share some initial findings through this discussion today, but I did want to note the caveat that these are still preliminary results, and the meter data is for a fairly small sample. It's not going to be statistically significant results, but it is really highly granular data and informative about how these systems are actually performing in the field. So with that, I think I'm passing it off to Steve.
All right, thank you, Christy. My name is Steve Pantano. I am Chief of Research with CLASP. We're a nonprofit organization based out of Washington, DC, and have been working on energy efficiency in the appliance sector for the past 20 years. I've been with CLASP myself for more than 10, and prior to that worked as a consultant to the Energy Star program. And our work on electrification is part of our broader research portfolio, which aims to look for climate savings outside of sort of the typical boundaries of the Appliance Standards Program at DOE and the Energy Star labeling program. So obviously fuel switching presents a big climate opportunity, both space and water heating, transitioning people off gas and other fuels like propane and with Nate Adams from HVAC 2.0 and Alexander Gard-Murray from Harvard University to analyze a concept that Nate came up with, where considering the dynamics of many homes in the US, which currently don't have a heat pump, but may have a fossil-based heating system and a standard unitary ducted air conditioner. The hypothesis was if we just replaced those air conditioners with minimum efficiency heat pumps at the time that equipment was scheduled to be replaced anyway. So we're moving people from a position of having a furnace and an AC to a furnace and a heat pump. And if we operated that heat pump very conservatively, that we could still sort of generate a lot of climate and energy bill savings for consumers almost everywhere in the country. Seemed like an interesting hypothesis. We did a fair bit of modeling of heating loads using a model that was first developed at Columbia University. And we found through that effort that this simple concept of basically taking all of these one-way air conditioners and putting in a SEER 15 single-speed air source heat pump, running it conservatively, again, so only down to about 40-degree Fahrenheit outdoor temperatures, that on average across the country, we would save, consumers could save energy on their energy bills in nearly every state. But more importantly, we could knock out about 40% of the gas use for space heating. And that's confined to the shoulder seasons, nothing particularly taxing on the heat pumps themselves. 40-degree outdoor temperature is well within the happy space for a SEER 15 air source heat pump. And yeah, we thought it was a pretty compelling opportunity. We said, well, how can we make this work effectively? And also sort of proposed the idea of distributor or installer incentives. So midstream, upstream, not so much at the consumer, but by doing things further upstream, we figure we could, with a policy like this on a national scale, deploy about 45 million heat pumps over a 10-year period for less than $10 billion by our calculations. So that paper was published back in May. I believe hopefully there's a link to it in the chat for those who are not familiar with it yet, but we've been continuing to discuss it now, both at the federal level and now with some states. So happy to discuss on this panel how that could fit into a broader portfolio of electrification projects. Thank you. I guess I'll pass to Monica.
Hi, everyone, and thanks to NEEP for having me participate in this panel. I'm Monica Newcomb. I work at the U.S. Department of Energy in the Buildings Technologies Office. And for recently, I've been helping lead a new initiative that was announced back earlier this spring called E3, Energy Emissions and Equity, which is focused on clean heating and cooling systems, and really looking at both deployment of those systems and needed research. And within the initiative, one of the aspects that we included in the announcement and really have been mapping out and thinking about carefully over the last few months is a focus on cold climate technology needs. And we are really looking at this comprehensively, the different system needs that, the systems that exist today, as well as what's needed in the future. We have also been lucky to participate in conversations with states and utilities across the country to get feedback on where people want to be headed and needs, which I think will be really relevant to this conversation today. And at the Department of Energy and the Buildings Technologies Office, we really are committed to working on research to provide solutions that are needed still. And we know that today there isn't really a great heating solution for a central system. So that is something that we definitely are going to be looking at, working more with manufacturers on in the future. And then the other thing I just wanted to call out too, that's another really big area of focus of the E3 initiative is low GWP refrigerants and thinking through the needs there and sort of next generation products that can go with those lower refrigerants as well.
Great. Well, again, thank you all so much for being on the panel today. And obviously to the audience who's here, and just another reminder to the audience that we will have an opportunity to sort of field some of your collective questions later on. So if during the conversation questions, comments come to mind, you can certainly include those, I guess, in the Q&A is a little bit more direct. But certainly use the chat for more information, or for general conversation. So getting into this conversation about the configurations, I thought that was helpful, Christy, for you to give a little bit of definition to what we're talking about in terms of supplemental systems and whole home and whole home with backup. Also wanted to sort of just highlight the fact that we realize that there are different motivations from different stakeholder groups when it comes to heat pump adoption. So it's not a one size fits all for necessarily for all customers or for the different stakeholders. And I just wanted to flag that certainly we have customers who are coming to this technology looking for things like comfort and affordability and efficiency. We have programs who are looking for energy savings in the form of kilowatt hours and summer kilowatt savings and fossil fuel and greenhouse gas savings. And we have policymakers who are also obviously looking to drive adoption of this technology from a lens of ensuring affordability and equity and low carbon energy systems more broadly. So when we coming to this. I think I just wanted to flag that there are definitely different perspectives, and I think part of the conversation will be ultimately about trying to find those sweet spots. Wanted to kick the conversation off a little bit just in terms of hitting on some of what we see as the key benefits around these different configurations. And so we'll start with where the market is today in this primarily supplemental system, and so just from what are some of these benefits that supplemental systems in particular bring to the market, and maybe I'll ask Monica to maybe jump in first, and others can pile on.
Sure. I think for the supplemental systems today, one thing I've heard a lot talking to different states is actually a component of resilience. So having two different fuel sources depending on needs, and if there's an outage, there's that angle that is a really great benefit. I think also you laid out a few of those, but I think cost is a component today that's really important. It's always important, but the supplemental systems can be more cost effective.
Yep. Christy or Steve, any other others that jump to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I'd certainly echo the resiliency piece. A lot of the customers that we interviewed through the survey and then spoke with on site expressed a fear in going all in with electricity, especially dealing with some of the storms that the Northeast gets. This crazy nor'easter that just came in a couple of days ago and knocked out power. If that happens in the middle of January, they're stuck. So having a backup in those times makes them feel a lot more comfortable. Also, this again is a pretty small sample, but we are seeing a bit better performance from ducted systems in particular in a primary with backup scenario, because there is less of that backup electric resistance usage.
Great.
And I guess just one further point maybe to add there is winter peak mitigation as well, right? I mean, if we collectively have a big task ahead to decarbonize the building sector, but the grid needs to do its part as well, both in terms of hardening an infrastructure, but also decarbonizing, right, to make sure we're not sort of driving big peaks that turn on our dirtiest power plants. So we have to sort of keep all of these factors in mind as we look to electrify and ensure we're not working against ourselves in that respect.
And maybe Steve, we'll stick with you on this, on moving to sort of the more a system that is covering more this whole home with backup system. Moving into that kind of range, what are some of the additional benefits that you see that maybe over just the supplemental type of system that is sort of playing a bigger backup role?
Yeah, I mean, cost is going to be a big factor for a lot of consumers. I think Monica may have mentioned this. The vast majority of people will replace what they have like for like, or the closest they can get to it, and be driven to the lowest first cost system that they can find. Even me as an energy efficiency professional would be hard pressed to come up with the capital to fully electrify my home. It's just the pure economics of it, right? So incentives are obviously needed to assist in that respect, but there aren't enough incentive dollars on the table to go around to everybody. So there's a huge portion of homeowners who will be facing things like an air conditioner replacement any day, basically as soon as the summer starts, air conditioners will start to fail again. Those customers will be pressed to get their house cooled off as quickly as possible. So these hybrid types of solutions can help in that respect, because you at least partially electrify their heating when winter comes around again. So, those customers are looking most likely for the cheapest, fastest, minimum efficiency air conditioner they can find. And a minimum efficiency heat pump will definitely provide better overall service. And you couple it with the existing furnace or boiler backup, and for a large percentage of homes, that's better than the alternative, which is putting in another air conditioner and having no electric heat options whatsoever. So I think I mentioned in my opening comments that we need a portfolio of approaches to really address the heating electrification problem most effectively. And we kind of have to be thinking about these consumers who aren't maybe on the cycle of furnace replacement, but there's other ways that we can get to them quickly and easily and not do anything particularly disruptive. Their equipment will look, feel, and function exactly the same way it does today, but we still manage to give them some degree of heating electrification and make even a small dent in the residential fossil consumption in doing so. So I think it's a powerful tool that we should be considering in addition to all the full electrification work that's going on these days.
As far as so like this jump is really going from the heat pump being the backup and relying on the existing fossil system to be the sort of the primary, and flip-flopping that and having the heat pump really be the primary and rely on the fossil as as the second stage, if you will. So that's kind of the jump that I'm talking about. I don't know if Christy or Monica had thoughts about the benefits in flip-flopping, that sort of moving from secondary to primary versus the other way around.
I'll just jump in quickly. I mentioned our research at Department of Energy is really looking at next generation all electric systems. But to answer your question, I do think it's really important. I think this is what Stephen was getting at, just meeting people where they are. And so if you can replace with a like system where you don't have to have a lot of changes to a system or how you're used to interacting with your HVAC, I do think that sort of what you're saying, having the fossil fuel be more of a secondary system starts you on that transition. And it might be easier for some people, depending on their systems that they have in place today, to do that versus adding in supplemental or maybe doing the all electric solution.
Yeah, and from our perspective, so there's a lot of challenges to take into account. So, ideally we would get everyone on these whole home systems and, maybe keep the fossil fuel on site as a backup for those extreme cold periods or to help mitigate grid impacts. But in order to size the system to meet that full, extreme heating load, it's going to be a lot more expensive. And then if it isn't used in that way, and you still are using your backup fossil fuel, below 20 or 15 degrees, that system is going to be cycling at a lower load. And if it's not a variable speed system, probably achieving a lower performance. So yeah, there's a lot of variables that are in play. So we're finding, if it is a primary with backup system, it's probably best to size the system a little bit lower than a whole home application.
Just to tack on, Monica made a good point of meeting people where they are. You kind of have to meet people where they are, and you have to meet buildings where they are in terms of their configuration and their climate zone and their installed equipment, right? And the quality of ductwork and insulation.
Yeah.
There are a few one-size-fits-all solutions here.
Especially in New England, where the building stock is all over the place. We have some homes in the sample from late 1800s to new construction that was built 5 years ago, and then within that, it's multi-zone, single-zone type systems. A lot of aspects to account for.
Yeah, I think that is definitely true. I think the region is unique in that we do have probably as much hydronic heating as any other region, and so the appeal of the ductless systems, I think, is pretty strong in those applications, and maybe a reason why that's so common in, why the market looks the way it does in the Northeast, and certainly in other parts of the country, it's going to look differently where you have a lot more forced air systems. Awesome. So I want to sort of move on and think a little bit about sort of taking this to the extreme, looking at it from kind of a whole building, a whole home system, and thinking through what are some of the benefits there from various perspectives, from the customer to a program to policymakers. What's attractive about that type of system?
Yeah, I'll jump in from a customer standpoint. So we were fortunate to have a lot of early adopters in our sample. So I think maybe 30 or 40% of the participants have on-site solar. So for them, it was a no-brainer because even though solar generation is lower in the winter, it was going to significantly decrease their bills compared to delivered fuel like propane or oil. So for them, it was a great option. And then being able to utilize your system more results in a faster payback period in most cases.
Thoughts from Steve or Monica on what the key benefits are on moving this type of configuration.
I think just one thought, and again, it goes back to sort of the user and meeting people where they are, but I have heard from a number of states or stakeholders in the Northeast, just the complexity and sort of the difficulties with the controls and integration, and the system's actually performing where they are or should be maybe in the supplemental system. So I think when you're going more of the sort of central approach or central system or whole home, some of that might fall out, and some of the controls aspects become less of an issue, which could be, I think, really a great benefit. And the systems can just perform more about the way that they are expected to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, that could be a benefit to installation contractors as well. I think we've received some anecdotal feedback that systems that do have those integrated controls require a lot more callbacks from the customer to troubleshoot, why isn't my system turning over when it's supposed to, or, gas furnace fan isn't turning on. So that would hopefully simplify the installer's involvement in the process.
Yeah, I think this is a line of conversation we may get into a little bit more, but certainly between some of the studies that have come out of the region and other regions about the fact that there is so much behavior that's involved in operating two systems in these kinds of supplemental configurations where you have a primary and the heat pump is sort of run as a supplemental system, not getting as much usage of the heat pump system as we would expect, and the hope that more automated controls can come in and help drive use of the heat pump and coordinate that kind of operation with another system. Like Christy said, I think those are, I think that's a fairly newer market and newer experiences for installers. And so between sort of the behavioral side and challenges with integrated controls, I do see this as being one of the big benefits of the whole home system, is that it takes a lot of the uncertainty around operation savings away. And I think, Monica, you mentioned that as well. So
if I could jump in also, I mean, in the long term, the fewer systems you have, the fewer costs you have for maintenance, and you don't have to worry about replacing your backup system independently either, right? So if you've got a separate heat pump or AC and furnace, they're on probably separate failure timelines and will be replaced out of cycle. So if you take that down to one integrated system, that's just fewer pieces of equipment to replace. I mean, I have a home with air source heat pump and an oil boiler backup, and I have to, as it is, I pay $300 extra a year to maintain my boiler, which I wouldn't have to pay if I didn't have that piece of equipment. Not to mention the oil smell in my basement every 6 months.
And just to add in from a program manager or utility perspective, so we're seeing with more of these whole home applications, the winter peak for residential loads will shift to the early morning hours when the outside air temperature is the lowest. So that could help distribute the peak load between morning hours and then your typical 5 to 7 p.m. And then from an evaluation standpoint, it's a lot easier to evaluate one system type than trying to parse out various heating sources and determine what percent of the load is served by each source, or how much that cold climate system actually contributed to the total system heating. Yeah, the utilization is just so variable with primary with backup systems. If they're incentivizing primary with backup, your equivalent full load hours are going to be all over the place.
And a whole home system would remove some of that. Correct.
Yep.
Let's stay on the topic of peak impacts. I think you guys have talked a little bit about that as an issue when it comes to the heat pump deployment. I know there's been analysis around the that suggests that sort of effective electrification, if we're actually able to, when we're able to get really scale up the amount of heat pumps that we're looking at potentially growing what is today a summer peak into a new winter peak, and risking driving up the size of the grid and likely the rates for electricity. So thinking about the mix of configurations that we could see in the field to help mitigate that. Any further thoughts on again, what mix of configurations might be, a good mix to address this issue?
Yeah, I mean, in the short term, it would probably be wisest to focus on going whole home with systems that need delivered fuels like propane or oil. Those are the dirtiest and most expensive fuel types. But if a home has an existing natural gas furnace, it's only 5-10 years old, that would probably be a good candidate for a primary with backup system. So when the temperature was really low, they could rely on that fossil fuel source. Ideally over time, we would integrate managed controls and maybe some customer opting in to different controls programs to help mitigate those demand impacts. But I think just focusing on the delivered fuel clients first would be a good step.
I would say electric resistance customers, current are another prime opportunity, right? The math is pretty simple there. You get a 3 or 4 times efficiency benefit with a heat pump for this on the same fuel, right? With no switching there.
Yeah, I would agree with those opportunities as first ones, to really focus on, maybe I'll just take this to a different angle. At Department of Energy, another thing that we're really focusing on and we'll be leaning into this year with some new research is just thermal storage or different storage configurations with heat pumps. And I think especially as Christy mentions, if we see more of a shift to early morning, there's a real opportunity with water heating and having storage there and great interactivity there to help balance that load along with heating and maybe to shift that to a different time. So that's just another component that we think is really important to think about as we look at sort of next generation products and to think how we can build that aspect in because we hear this concern a lot. And, if you look at the analysis and, Dave, as you mentioned, when we hit that point, there definitely will be a new peak to consider and balance. months out.
As far, yeah, I mean, I think along this line of complementary strategies, Monica, you mentioned storage. I think Christy, you mentioned the flexibility functionality of heat pumps to move that operation around as you know, in some way. What about the interrelationship of weatherization? Would that suggest, if we were successful at weatherizing homes and buildings, does that change the conversation at all? Does that suggest that we can do more whole home, or that we should, you know, look to drive towards primary with backup? Thoughts on that?
So we were actually quite surprised to see that the weatherization level of the home, based on independent manual J's and blower door tests, was not as closely correlated to system performance as we would have expected. So that was a bit of a surprise, but we did find that customer satisfaction was much higher when the home had gone through a weatherization retrofit. So yeah, in terms of higher customer satisfaction, certainly should do it, but the impacts on performance are not as closely tied. So that could be more related to how the customer wants to use their system, whether they do a set it and forget it or set back overnight and the system has to ramp up quickly in the morning, and then what other types of fuels they have on site.
Thanks, Christy.
And I'll just add, you know, our analysis definitely shows that building envelope improvements, especially in the northern climates, will allow for better comfort and overall, you know, need, maybe a downsizing of equipment or whatnot. But to Christy's point, I really think that that's modeling analysis we've done. And another area we really will be leaning in over the next year is sort of lab performance as well as field validation to explore some of these issues and have some better data points.
I'll just take advantage of what you just said, Monica. The fact that, Christy, you guys are just finishing up the research that you're doing in the Northeast. Any suggested research that you would put on Monica's list for follow, you know, things that you weren't able to explore as much as you wanted to, or questions that you think are relevant to the market?
Certainly expanding the sample would be number one on our list. 43 homes is great, but, more is better. And, we also are very aware that we had a lot of early adopters and these systems were installed in 2017, 2018 for the most part. So it would be nice to collect data from some more recent program participants. We are also planning to look more into defrost mode and the usage of electric resistance backup for central ducted systems. So that's two of our remaining tasks to do for this heating season analysis. But we have received a few anecdotal customer complaints about their systems blowing cold air, which shouldn't be happening. The fan should be turning off during defrost mode, but that may be a one-off scenario, but we certainly want to investigate that in more detail.
Thank you. I figured that was a question for you, Steve. I don't know if you have
I don't know if it's in Monica's realm or not, but installer training and awareness efforts are critical here. Just talking to my co-author, Nate Adams, there's libraries of stories about bad installations and bad customer experiences that spoil heat pumps for them and all their friends and neighbors when they post about it on Facebook, right? So we really have to be cognizant of the bigger ecosystem here and the fact that, we don't want another CFL experience, right? Where it turns into a PR nightmare just because the system may be perfectly capable of doing everything on its label, but if it's installed incorrectly or the controls are set up incorrectly, the customers doesn't care, and they're going to be unhappy, and that could have really widespread implications for everyone who's working on this issue. So I think, that right sizing, installer certifications and quality controls or whatever needs to be put into place. There needs to be as much of a priority as the equipment itself in many cases.
Yeah, and there's certainly plenty of very well-trained contractors out there, but a lot of the feedback that we also heard was that they're having trouble hiring and recruiting trained staff. So just the market pool is pretty low right now, especially when we're looking forward and thinking about electrifying, 80, 90% of the market. We're going to have to develop education programs around heat pump installations. And then there's also probably a bit of customer training required as well. We had quite a few contractors say that their customers didn't believe that heat pumps could heat their homes effectively. So starting to get some education materials out there and show some of this performance data would be helpful.
On that point, Christy, I think there was some questions just about, I think in response to Steve talking about systems turning over at 30 or 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and questions just about, what are we seeing as realistic low temperature capabilities and performance, at least from your studies. Where are you seeing systems operate well down to? I mean, but generally, what are you seeing?
So we are still digging into that critical peak period for this study, and that will be included as part of our final deliverable. But these systems that were designed for whole home, which was 37% of our sample of the 43 homes, they operated down to -5, -7 degrees in the course of January and February of this past heating season. Achieving performance between 1 and 2 COP on average, at that point you are going to have your electric resistance kick in. But for the ductless systems that did not see or did not have electric resistance backup, we are seeing really good average performance for the heating season in the 2.6 range.
I don't want my earlier comments to be misconstrued. That was by no means advocating for a 40-degree cutoff temperature. That was simply the very conservative estimate we did in our analysis, just to try to make things as conservative as we could on operation and performance. I'll speak just from personal experience. My house has 2 SEER 15 single-speed heat pumps, and I can keep my house comfortable down to 30 degrees outdoor temperature before my kids start to complain that it's too cold. So 40 degrees is definitely by no means where the technology is at. And obviously cold climate heat pumps can do a lot better than that, even down into the -5 territory with no issues.
I definitely didn't mean to suggest that, Steve, but thank you for the clarification. I think one kind of line of discussion you started down, Steve, was around the consumer satisfaction, consumer confidence. So I wanted your thoughts on sort of the implications of different systems on the greater consumer psyche of heat pumps, and is there a benefit in systems that are operating at low temperatures, providing a lot of the home or building's heat, in order to provide confidence to consumers and to have consumers not think of it like, oh well, it gets cold, but I need to shift the backup. So anyway, thoughts on the kind of the benefits of consumer satisfaction towards market transformation, and what some of these configurations might suggest to that conversation.
I mean, that's an interesting point. We haven't, by no means have we studied this. I'm completely hypothesizing here, but to get back to that idea of meeting people where they are, some people will probably be comforted and satisfied and more confident in a system that can do it all. While I would speculate that a lot of others would feel really good having that security blanket of their old trusty furnace for at least for a while, right? And this is not, the rates at which we're talking about decarbonizing the building sector, we're not yet at a point where we have to only choose one strategy. We still have time. I mean, if we're decarbonizing by 2045, 2050, whatever the year is, it's at least a decade and a half, 2 decades away. So for, in that interim period of time, it's beneficial to have hybrid strategies in addition to full electrification strategies, just because you probably can't electrify everyone fast enough fully at the pace that we're talking about, right? So you'll have these air conditioner failure cycles before you get to fully electrify everybody. So you should be doing these partial things and prioritizing and segmenting your building stock and your consumers accordingly, right? So you're meeting people where they are, electrifying those with the highest needs or the highest energy burdens, or the most sort of psychological readiness for whole home full heat pump systems first, because they'll be the most likely to accept. And for everybody else, have other tools that get them at least partly down the road, so that, when their turn in the queue comes up, they've at least got some experience with a heat pump doing some of their heating, so they know that the technology works and they're ready to take a bigger step to full electrification down the road.
Thanks, Steve. One question that's come up is around the, what do we do? What are best practices around when we have say a hybrid system or a primary with backup when that fossil system fails? And is that an opportunity to go to whole home at some point? Thoughts on, what do we do with all of these dual configuration systems when the fossil system fails? Is it replace that fossil system again, or are there strategies, best practices for replacing them down the road?
Well, depending on how the cold climate system was designed, there's a really good chance that it was designed to serve up to 100% of the home's heating load. That's at least what we're finding. In many cases, it's actually been oversized. So it could be something to consider, is to ask that customer if they would be willing to try using their cold climate system as their primary heating source. And if that's not an option for them, consider putting in a smaller fossil fuel backup.
Monica,
I suppose just quickly, I suppose you could switch from fossil to electric resistance backup in the case that there was no, the system wasn't capable of doing the full job at that point. There's not a great answer to that question that I've come across yet, but it's a very good question to ask.
Anything to add on that one, Monica?
I think the only thing I just want to emphasize here is just, I think it's really critical that we have products that people are happy with, and they're, gives them the comfort that they're seeking for the heating in their homes. And so I think that we want to make sure the technology is in a place that when it's being replaced, it's able to provide that comfort. Yeah. So I think we just, as we're thinking about making the transition, we want to make sure we have that product before there's a really big push for a full swap out.
Steve, as a follow-up, there was a question about some of the options that states could consider as far as eliminating sales of cooling only systems. It sounded like you proposed one mechanism. Are there others that you've thought through, or?
We're still working on that. Incentives are a good tool, right? If you can, so you're obviously not phasing out one-way air conditioners, although that would be a great thing to do, is if you stop providing incentives for air conditioners or start increasing incentives even for the very basic heat pumps to try to push ACs out by bringing the cost of a basic two-way heat pump down below that of an AC, that and making that sort of the de facto option in the market for the price-conscious consumer, that would presumably have some of that market effect that you're desiring. I don't know that anyone's gone so far as to propose like a policy to ban one-way AC, unitary ACs, although I think that would be a great thing to do in light of where we are in the market these days. That's probably, because of the preemption rules, something that would have to be considered by DOE down the road, if at all.
And did you have a general sense of what that incremental cost was from going from sort of minimally compliant AC to minimally compliant heat pump?
I think we assumed about $1,000 price difference at the consumer. And then if you back that up the supply chain, it's about a $500 difference at the distributor, which is why we were suggesting distributor-focused incentives to keep that total cost down, and also to keep rebates are, there's some people are vehemently against messing with the kitchen table transaction, as it's called, and complicating the sales process for heat pumps. So the more that can be done to take that choice away and that decision point away from the consumer and really ease the sort of make it the default or the de facto option to have a heat pump when your AC fails, I think the better. And doing that upstream would take that, just take that complication away from the final transaction with the customer.
Another sort of question around non-participant impacts, whether it's particularly around electric, impacts on electric rates if we can electrify well. How would various configurations differ on non-participant impacts? Maybe any thoughts on that? That might be a little bit weedy. That's okay.
Yeah, we haven't dug into that as part of this study. It certainly is a very interesting question.
Yeah, I think it's sort of a part of an equity discussion. I think in terms of if we can electrify well, depress electric rates for everybody, I think is the direction of the comment. And I guess we would probably agree with that. And any other thoughts on that? That's certainly one of the benefits. I think we concluded from our electrification report a number of years ago the opportunity to increase kilowatt hour use and do it, spread it strategically during times of low use and in the likelihood of depressing rates to support the infrastructure. All right, I know we're sort of getting down to time. I did sort of want to kind of let folks, give folks a chance to sort of step back and say, so what? Like, where does to answer the question that we sort of started the panel with around, so what is the right configuration or mix of configurations to sort of satisfy different objectives? And yeah, thoughts on where you land on that. If it's a mix or if there's a particular configuration that at the market, whether it's the Northeast or just the national market, might want to push extra hard on. Start with Steve. Why don't we start with you?
Yeah, great question. Again, I think it comes down to really understanding the local dynamics, right? And meeting people, meeting homes where they are with their existing weatherization, installed equipment, the age of the equipment, the consumer's energy burden. There's a bunch of factors that sort of would tend to put people in homes into different groups or strata where the different solutions would be more or less appropriate for each, right? And it's going to be very local. There's definitely no one size fits all, but it also says to me that we need to be doing multiple things at once to get lots of people at least on the path to electrification, and not let some of these hybrid solutions be an obstacle to full electrification. They should be complementary, right? Because the simple fact is there's so many millions of homes that need to be electrified in the next 2 decades. We can't do them all fully right now. So we need to be doing as many as we can fully right now, but also as many as we can partially right now. And there are groups, homes, and consumers that'll be more or less ready for the various types of approaches. So I think it comes down to, the state or local agency who's trying to figure this out to say who belongs in each of those groups for full electrification and this set of incentives and this type of equipment, and who should be prioritized for hybrid approaches and now.
Monica or Christy, are you motivated to go next?
Sure, I can go next. I would just say yes to everything Steve said. I completely agree. I would just maybe call out that the answer changes over time, perhaps. I know I've focused a lot on technology, but I do think that there are going to be some advances in next generation products that are just going to be better. And that will probably change then the solution set. Not saying that the equipment today doesn't work. I just think we can improve on it. And then also with technology changing, then people, I think people are going to become more comfortable. We talked a lot about some of the, challenges with the workforce. So I think when contractors become more comfortable with the equipment too and installing them, everything just will move along. So I do think with time that answer will shift.
Good point.
And I'd echo all of that as well. It's not a simple solution, but as Monica said, whatever the customer is most comfortable with at this point. And, we did see some challenges and heard some anecdotal feedback about systems not operating ideally in some conditions. But overall, in our 600 plus customer survey, we received very high performance ratings from these whole home systems, slightly lower than primary with backup, but mostly because they were nervous that they might not have a backup during cold periods, not really that their system was performing lower than the primary with backup. So, the low-hanging fruit is to focus on new construction in the near term. But yeah, as technologies improve and costs go down, it will be a changing discussion.
Great. Well, we will leave it at that. I know we could probably go down a couple of other rabbit holes, but this has been great. I appreciate all of you being on the panel today. I definitely do want to invite the audience. I mean, this question about where do you stand, where do you land on this mix of configurations? We're certainly interested in hearing your ideas. So send those over in whether that's in the chat or the Q&A. But again, thank you guys. Thank you to the panel. This was fun. And I think I'm kicking it over to Jess and Jen to take us into our next session.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Hello. I hope you didn't catch me fluffing my hair. You think they saw that?
Great. No, it's natural, completely natural.
So awkward. Hello, everybody. It's Jen and Jess back at you today. Thrilled to see so many return, plus a few more. Welcome. Jennifer, welcome. Would you introduce yourself for us?
Yes, Jen Wasson. I am the development manager at NEEP and the second half of the J&J show here.
The J&J, we're copywriting that. And
so
I am
copywriting.
And I am Jessica Augutte. I am the industry relations and event manager for NEEP. So welcome back. We are thrilled to have you. The questions in the chat, loving it. Please.
The chat conversation is fabulous.
You should see the questions coming in. They're not just smart people reporting out here. We have quite a few in the room as well. Just some really, really good questions, some great ideas. So I'm thrilled to see the exchange of resources and the connections being made. I think it's just lovely, Jennifer.
It's just a lot of conversation that we're having, even though it's virtual, but the conversation is almost more so.
Yeah, I know. It's great, right? Because you can't usually talk while people are speaking. That's when you're face to face, totally rude. But in this case, it's totally welcome. So
it's a lot easier to share links when you can just paste it.
Oh, it's like real-time instant gratification. Like I keep telling people, we trust you. We trust you to multitask. So jump off, check out a report while you're listening, come back in. I think it's great. I think it's a great use of everybody's time. One might say efficient.
You're taking cues from my playbook here.
I'm being punny. Okay, so today, Jen and I are thrilled to bring our second segment of sound bites. Jen, you gonna try that again today? Describe to us what a sound bite is.
I am. They are NEEP talks.
Nice.
Well done. Word TED. NEEP talks, but I absolutely love it because our speakers are experts in their field. They have a short amount of time to chat about some great topics. As you said yesterday, it brings some extra texture to our event. And I love that our speakers are willing to share their contact information so the conversation can continue on.
That's right.
Event.
Yep, that's a big thing to note. So as we go through these three upcoming sound bites, our speakers' contact information will be in the chat. You can also email us after the fact if you'd like, and we can get it to you. So feel free to just keep that dialogue going. That's how we move things forward. So here we go.
So we get to bring the first person up.
I'm very excited. Okay, so this gentleman is lovely. I'm not going to say that he's the only one, but he is lovely. Reinhard, who is our director of the Center for Environmental Engineering at the University of Maryland. And he is actually going to be coming to us from Germany. So the webinars just bring us all closer together.
International.
It's great. And he's going to be talking about what is on the horizon for heat pumps. So we will now give it to Reinhard. Thank you.
Thanks. Welcome.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to speak about my favorite topics, the future of heat pumps, and I hope I can inspire you with regard to the potential that lies ahead of us. Here's a challenge. The IEA has determined that today, essentially, there are 1.6 billion air conditioners in use worldwide. In 2050, this will be 5.6 billion air conditioners. And not only that, refrigeration systems and heat pumps are not included in this count. Now imagine that the energy consumption, material consumption to build air conditioners by 2050 will have tripled or quadrupled. This is not feasible or acceptable, and the industry is ready for disruption. However, when we look at the last 100 years, the basic concept of the most commonly used heat pump, the vapor compression system, has not changed. But the weight of the system, the size, the energy consumption, the cost, all these parameters have come down significantly. And since the last few decades, essentially leveled off. And conventional wisdom says there is no room anymore for any breakthrough. I claim a breakthrough is possible. Not only that, what if the traditional representatives in the industry, the manufacturers, the researchers, and everybody else does not see that we are right at this jumping off point? But for example, Google or Tesla does. They eat our lunch. And I want to argue we are at such a jumping off point. To put things in perspective, here's a refrigeration compressor from over 100 years ago. It is a huge amount of metal, and when you go by the railing here, this is probably hip high for a person not to run into the flywheel, then I get an appreciation how big that piece of equipment is. But it has a performance, the same performance as this cold compressor that an installer can carry under his arm. It's 80 pounds. It's not impossible. In 100 years, there was tremendous progress in compressor design. And when I ask industry representatives if that similar progress is possible today, many shake their heads. But in a Swiss lab, there is a compressor, this little stainless steel thing down here in the lower left-hand corner, that has the same performance as a scroll compressor besides it, and it is 10 times smaller. 1,000 times smaller than the historic device, Dana's dinosaur in the background. So this is the potential of compressor technology. And it is still a vapor compression system. It is still conventional technology, but not business as usual. Let's talk about heat exchangers, the other big component. On this graph here, on the x-axis is the tube diameter of that typical heat exchanger, air to refrigerant heat exchanger, let's say. And the blue symbols is compactness. That is the heat transfer surface area per volume of the heat exchanger. That means how much heat transfer capacity is built into that same volume. And the red symbols are how much material, cubic centimeters of material are consumed for 1 cubic square centimeter of surface area. The traditional heat exchangers that you buy today are in this region here. So very high material utilization, low material utilization. It needs a lot of material for given performance and not very compact. Microchannels are in this area. There's a lot of hope. The industry is exploring the range in between as well, and we do that in our research at Maryland too. But the excitement is in this region. Once the dimensions go below 1 millimeter, below a 1/16th of an inch or so, it is really getting exciting. And just to put things in perspective, the best heat exchanger we know is a human lung. On this scale here, it is twice as high, so way above the screen. And not only that, it is self-cleaning, it is self-repairing, and it lives 100 years. This is the ultimate goal for heat exchanger technology. But without going that far, and with DOE funding and funding from the Office of Naval Research, we have now air-to-refrigerant heat exchangers. You see here some prototypes, and they in themselves, the pictures don't tell you that much. But what looks like tiny tubes here are really tubes that are droplet-shaped, as you see here in the lower left-hand corner. And the performance is much better. The heat exchangers are much more compact. And these droplet-shaped tubes are already produced as prototypes nevertheless, but in significant numbers. So there's hope this may actually happen. And the current project goal is that the heat exchangers, these coils, are 20% smaller than traditional ones, 20% less charge, 20 to 30% less material. And what we have as prototypes in the lab right now is doing significantly better than this and has the potential to go beyond. Let me put this together and challenge the thought that future air conditioner/heat pump have half the volume and potentially a third of the weight of traditional technology. Traditional compressor, 40 kilograms or 80 pounds, future ones could be 10% of that. Current heat exchangers, 40 kilograms, future ones, 20 kilograms. Balance of plant, that is the housing, the controls, and base plate, whatever goes along with this, is usually the same as a compressor or the heat exchangers. So a third of the total system. Here it would be roughly 9. The current heat pump/air conditioner you have in your backyard is 120 kilograms, 240 pounds. In the future, it may be 35 kilograms or 70 pounds. This is not totally unrealistic. And it may be 10 years away, it may be 15 years away, but we have the insight and prototype tools, maybe just lab prototypes, but nevertheless, that can achieve this goal. As an image to take as a take-home message, this big box is a traditional air conditioner you have in your backyard. That is the compressor, it goes with it. The future unit may look like this. It's the same performance. Putting this together, the demands for increasing air conditioner and heat pump use, the amount of materials that are being consumed and the energy consumption, we really need to have to collaborate, the researchers, the industry, the users, the installers, to conduct HVAC research so that an entire industry worldwide can manufacture these 5.6 billion air conditioners plus heat pumps plus refrigeration systems that are much smaller, much less resource intensive than today, and on top work in buildings that have no net energy consumption. So we have tall goals, big goals, but we also have background technology that could get us there in quite elegant ways. Thank you very much.
Hello. That was
Okay.
amazing. I love the whole comparison to the lung.
Yes.
It's amazing that that's the most efficient heat exchange. We just need to mimic the self-generating celled lung. I told you he was lovely, right? You all agree?
You were completely right about that.
Let's throw it in the chat. Let's hear it for Renard. That was amazing. And his contact information should also be in the chat. I can't see it right now, but I suspect it is. So you should all feel free to reach out and connect with him. So next up, we have Kathy. I'm excited about this. The founder and president of Dandelion is here today to take us through geothermal.
Oh, this is always a hot topic.
Didn't you use that yesterday?
No, I feel like it's a new one.
I think you're all wet. Geothermal, water? No? Okay, that's all I got.
Let's bring the experts on.
Let's bring the experts on. All right, we are going to toss it to Kathy and we'll be back.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kathy Hanoun, and I'm the founder and president at Dandelion. We're a company based in the Northeast, really trying to make residential geothermal heat pumps more affordable and much simpler for homeowners. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing. First of all, what is a ground source or geothermal heat pump? It's actually quite similar to air source heat pumps, which we've been talking a lot about so far. But the primary difference is instead of exchanging heat with the outside air, ground source heat pumps or geothermal heat pumps exchange heat with the ground. And the advantage of this is that the ground maintains a stable temperature year round. So you get to draw on the 50-degree Fahrenheit ground, even in the coldest days of winter. And you get to dump your heat into the 50-degree Fahrenheit ground, even on the hottest days of summer. So very briefly, this system consists of a heat pump, which usually sits in the basement where the furnace used to be. It connects to the existing distribution system, and there are heat pumps that can do duct-based heating or radiators. And then some ground loops, which you see depicted here. These can come in different form factors, but at Dandelion, we typically do closed loop vertical pipes. So these are just plastic pipes that extend typically 300 to 500 feet deep into the ground, but they're only 1.25 inches diameter, so sort of thin and deep. And you know what we find, it has been very effective in sort of communicating the potential of geothermal and the value of it to homeowners, is that we can offer them a value proposition that's sort of inspired by what the rooftop solar industry has done. So we talked to a homeowner, and a very typical sort of average monthly cost, if you just averaged out their total cost for fuel oil, let's say, and conventional AC over the whole year, they might be paying about $325 a month. We can show them, actually, if you switch to ground source, you can pay nothing up front because you can get financing that will help to cover the cost. And your monthly payment will be immediately less than you're already paying right now. So you get brand new equipment that does heating and cooling, and the loan repayment amount, plus the amount of electricity you'll have to spend on average each month to run your system, will still add up to less than what you're already paying. So you can imagine that for a lot of homeowners, this is a very intriguing proposition, just because who doesn't want to save money for getting a brand new heating and cooling system that's emissions free? We've also focused a lot at Dandelion on just how to bring this type of product to market and how to make it as hassle-free as possible for customers. So the process that we've ended up with today is homeowners can sign up online on our website, dandelionenergy.com. If they qualify, and today we only support homes with ductwork, but we're working to expand to radiators as quickly as we can. But if they qualify, we will do a sales call with them to really understand the specifics of their home. Because while this graph is generally like on average true, of course, it will look slightly different for each home. So we understand the details of the home. We ask for a short list of pictures for the homeowner to send to us so we can really make sure that we understand the details of that particular home. And then if the homeowner wants to move forward, we design a full system for them and install it. And I think geothermal really has an important role to play alongside air source heat pumps. I think both will be critical technologies as we work together to electrify heating, which is such a huge task, as I think probably every presenter has said. But I think one of the key advantages from a systems perspective of ground source heat pumps is that they really don't strain peak demand very much because you have the ground, which is maintaining that constant temperature year round. So this graph was taken from a study looking at what it would look like if Rhode Island shifted to air source and ground source heat pumps, what impact that would have on the grid. And you can just see that the load factor advantage of ground source is helpful. And hopefully we can make use of the ground source technology in places where shaving peak is very beneficial for the grid. Lastly, I'll just mention, so this picture came out in a Wall Street Journal article that was about heat pumps. It was great to see a mainstream newspaper that's so highly esteemed and widely read talking about replacing furnaces with heat pumps. And they had this picture of a Dandelion crew installing ground loops. Those black things are ground loops. That's what the pipes look like, into a hole in the ground that they had just drilled. And I wanted to show this just to make the point that I think all of us recognize that the existing HVAC contractors, there's going to be a transition where they will start installing more and more heat pumps over time. Because the ground source heat pumps require drilling, we've also started to hire drillers out of oil and gas and retrain them to drill holes for ground heat exchangers. So it's just been a really, I think, another piece of the workforce transition that will happen. And then I guess the last thing I'll say, the thing I'll end with, is the thing that really excites me about the potential of geothermal is that the operating cost is very low, because the efficiency of these systems is so high. And so I think there is an opportunity here to really prioritize equity. I mean, a lot of homeowners who are paying the most for heating today are the ones who have the fuel oil furnaces and the electric resistance heaters. They tend to be lower income and they can't invest necessarily in the highest efficiency equipment or get the gas line extended to their house or whatever it is. So my hope is that as we continue to bring the cost down of these systems, this sort of value proposition will work for people who are just trying to save money each month. And we're already seeing some of that. So some of our customers are adopting renewable heating, not because it's renewable, but because it's a way of saving money. And I think that is very encouraging. So thank you for having me.
That was awesome.
Another good one.
Yeah, I love that. I love how creatively different areas of our industry are thinking about the workforce development, because it's a serious topic, right? And so I like hearing that. It's like, okay, well, we can retrain people who are already doing similar work with this upgraded or different type of technology. So I
workforce is so big right now. So yeah, exactly as you said, this transition that was very interesting.
Yeah,
I appreciated that take on it.
Definitely. And I personally would like to thank, Jen and I both would like to thank our sponsors. So I know we think it at the top of the hour and in our breaks, and they're all over all the collateral, but I want you all to know how important you are to this program. And I want the attendees to know how important our sponsors are, right? As Carolyn said, we're a small nonprofit. This is how we bring people together. This is how we get everybody hearing the same information and, rowing in the same direction as we meet our challenges. So without sponsorships, we wouldn't be able to get this done. So we really appreciate all of our sponsors.
Yes, huge thank you.
Yep. So that being said, I think that Kathy's little segue there lends nicely to our next speaker, Frank, who's going to be talking to us about workforce development. So Frank is the executive director at the Center for Smart Building Technology, and he's excellent. You're going to love him. I'm a huge fan. We've only met via webinar, but I definitely can't wait to know him better. So with that, let's let Frank take it away.
All right. Hello, Frank.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. I want to talk today a little bit about workforce development. I've been in education for about 20 years. I did a lot of stuff with the work with the Department of Energy and the solar decathlon effort, a couple houses we did with them. I came to Roxbury and let me see, is this, oops, sorry. I came to Roxbury about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. So what happened at Roxbury in 2017 to 2018, Roxbury Community College was put on the Boston Clean Energy Map with its 3,000 panel solar canopy over the parking lot. It also had 151 geothermal wells beneath the parking lot. Installation was one of the largest in the city, and the school got tons of publicity for that. Soon afterwards, an advisory board was formed with representatives from some of Boston's leading facilities management departments, consultants, and organizations. Organizations such as Harvard, Northeastern, Boston Medical Center, Siemens, Automated Logic, Skanska, Arup, National Grid, Eversource, A Better City. They wanted to form a smart building technology center. So the center was eventually launched with a grand opening, a couple of ceremonies. The big one was in January of 2020 with Senator Markey and Mayor Janey before she was mayor. So it was clear that the zeitgeist had changed and buildings are now run by computers, and all these people were having major problems obtaining the workforce required to run and integrate these multiple systems required to run these buildings. So we launched the center and to specifically address this problem. So we got together with our partners in our advisory board and we drafted a strategy map with 4 major tracks. We wanted to be an aggregator of best-in-class energy efficiency programs. So we wanted, because to train everyone in Boston on energy efficiency and bring the people to the center that we're going to possibly hire our students. Number 2, we wanted to be a preferred producer of state-of-the-art building automation system technicians. We want to be a center for thought leadership, and we want to be a hub for community engagement. Let me see. So we aligned our program mission with the Boston 2050 carbon neutral goals, saying that we're going to produce the workforce necessary for Boston to really meet those goals. As you probably know, buildings in Boston account for 70% of the carbon emission problem. And most of the low-hanging fruit to date has been on energy efficiency has been kind of obtained already with the lighting and LED savings. But studies show currently that optimizations of building automation sequences is the next best low-hanging fruit out there, as it can squeeze an additional 29% energy savings from the buildings. So we worked with this organization called the Best Center. It was a consortium of schools around the country who got this huge National Science Foundation grant, and it was renewed a couple of years. multi-million dollars. And the problem was it came from the National Science Foundation Advanced Technological Education sector. So the problem was that this grant was specifically targeted on designing new curriculum and open source non-proprietary lab equipment to teach building automation in a vendor agnostic way. You know, as you may know, building systems a lot of them are controlled by vendors, and there's maybe 7 to 8 large players out there. And the integration of all these systems is really a problem. So this is one of the things that we learned from our advisory board. They really need people, workers on staff that knew how to manage these people or do the integration themselves with such tools as BACnet or Modbus. So another thing that was very important that we learned is there's very high barriers to entering this profession. If I'm an 18-year-old and I want to go into building automation, very few pathways I can take, very few schools. And, you know, you can't just walk into a proprietary vendor's office and say, I want to get trained in your systems. It's very difficult. So we raised over $1 million for the lab, which was completed last month, which you see pictures of here. And you see basically a lot of our very specific customized training things in these suitcases, 3 levels in the suitcases. We have some heat pumps here on the left. And then we have a full-blown air handling unit with equipment on the side. So the students plug their laptops into all this equipment and they drag icons over and start sequencing and wiring actually some of the sensors and inputs and outputs. So this is just more of our kind of program. This is the energy efficiency side of the program, which is all these certification programs, which, you know, you can't really separate from the BAS side. So on the residential side, we teach HERS and building performance institute certifications. We teach passive house on the residential and multifamily. We teach building operator certification, well, LEED, Association of Control Professional certification, and G-Pro. So we you know, over the last year, we probably ran like 100 people through these programs. And these programs are very good because we're constantly dragging curriculum content from them and including them in our BAS program. So all this 1.5 years of development, working with this big National Science Foundation grant, we developed this BAS curriculum. We also looked at how the vendors were doing their certification programs, and we also used some of their terminology, such as a BAS technician associate, a BAS technician practitioner, a BAS technician, which is the other 2 added together. And we also looked at the amount of time that they used to train these people, and they were running into about 100 to 120 hours usually. So we developed a standalone certificate program, and we also took this curriculum and inserted it into an associate's degree program in the engineering degree path with a emphasis on smart building technology. The classes are much longer, and it gives students more time to work with this stuff. So another thing we did recently is over the last year is we beta tested modules of this curriculum with some of the major players in Boston, major facilities management departments. And we learned a couple things from that beta testing. We adjusted the pedagogy to be more, it's hard to explain, it's more like Lego Mindstorms. Like, if you know that program, that Lego Mindstorms are used often to teach robotics in the Boston school system. So when I teach a boot camp, robotics boot camp, there's often like 20 to 30% of the students already know the software. But what's interesting about the software is very similar to the BAS, kind of like Tritium, Niagara, or other systems where you're using kits and you're dragging algorithms over to this graphical user interface and tying it to and sequencing the things. And you do things like, if the temperature is between 20 and 50 and 70 degrees, turn on this actuator. So it's very similar to the Lego Mindstorms things. And we learned that it's easier to teach the students that way, starting with that sort of thing where they're actually making things right off the bat, than to start with an overview, the traditional way, overview of base building systems. I think that scares a lot of people away, and all they see is a steep learning curve. So we made a bunch of adjustments for that. So just to wrap it up, there's such a great demand for this emerging profession. I can't tell you how many calls I get a day asking me for people. I can't fill up all the requests we have. This whole thing is really about not just the technology, but the integration of that technology and the distribution of it. We were just named a Center of Excellence by the Association for Control Professionals, so that's kind of exciting. But I often think I like to kind of quote with this William Gibson quote, which is, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed yet. Here at the center, we view our job as evenly distributing the future. And so it's a fun job. So I think we're in the right place at the right time. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
It's true though, right? We this opportunity, and we've got to get the tools to the training out there. There's so many pieces of the puzzle to make all this work.
It's very true. And the time is now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now is when we need to move forward.
Absolutely.
Things are hot.
No, not even.
No?
No.
Oh, I thought I got it that time.
So I just wanted to by name thank our sponsors again. Our lead sponsors for this event are Daikin, Mitsubishi, Train, Carrier, Connecticut Deep.
And our supporting sponsors are Fujitsu and Abode.
And do you know what all of those organizations have in common, Jennifer?
Oh, I think I do.
Okay, Jennifer, you in the back? Can you answer the question?
Me.
Yeah.
They are all NEEP allies.
That is correct.
Woo-hoo.
They are NEEP allies. So I know we have a lot of our NEEP allies out there in the room.
Hello.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. We missed you. So our NEEP allies program, real quick, because if there's extra time, Jen and I are going to tell you about it.
So many things we can discuss.
So this is a membership with our organization. It gets you access to all sorts of like weekly policy emails with policy updates in the region.
Which are super helpful.
Yep, other industry events and things like that that we compile weekly. So very current. And then we're able to, if you're an ally, you're able to get in touch with us and we can set you up with one of our experts to follow up if you need some more information on what you're reading, explanation, anything like that. Also some opportunities to collaborate with some of our other allies organizations, right? So partnering on grants, different initiatives, things like that. So that's part of it. You get passes to our events.
This one.
Like this one right here, you would have had passes to, as well as we do these, Jen and I host these allies webinars every other month, which might be a reason that people don't want to join actually. So maybe we shouldn't tell them, but there are lots of, we bring to you a lot of initiatives that we're working on. Our other allies membership are working on points of engagement, things you can get in on, and just trying to keep everybody again, up to date. What we know, we want you to know. And really that's the channel is our allies network. So if you're interested, that's my other hat. I manage that program. So you could kind of consider me as a member of your staff. I hope some of your allies would say about me. If you have a question, I can connect you to the right people, but if you want to get in touch with me, I'm happy, obviously, to talk more about it.
Definitely worth a conversation.
Absolutely. And I'd love to get to know a little bit about you and your organization, regardless of where our relationship goes. So do reach out. I'm happy to chat. And that brings us up to our upcoming break. We're running a little bit ahead of schedule, but we figure you could use a little bit of time back to go check some emails, walk the dog, fill up your water, whatever it may be. But we will get some coffee.
Essential.
I probably shouldn't have any more coffee. But that puts us back. What time are we back at? 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock. Yes, our colleague Ben Hiller will be bringing us back at 3 for our exciting session 4, Emerging Heat Pump Solutions for the Toughest Challenges.
I sat in on the tech call for this. This is quite the subject.
We're ending on a high. I mean, the whole workshop has been a high note, but we're going to continue and end on a high note.
That's right. So go get your water and we will see you back here at 3 o'clock. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon. Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Hiller. I'm the technical manager here at NEEP, working on all things HVAC. Welcome back. Hope you had a good break. Hope you've been enjoying the workshop so far. We've had some amazing panels, sound bites, color commentary from Jess and Jen. Everything has been so far fantastic. I hope everybody's having a good time. I'm just going to give everyone a minute to settle in, get back from break here. Hope everybody can get back online. Hope you had a nice cup of coffee or walk the dog, as they were saying. I'm going to shortly be introducing our panel 4. So welcome back, everyone. I hope everybody is online. Hope everybody's having a good time. Again, for anybody joining us, my name is Ben Hiller. I'm the technical manager here at NEEP. We're going to be jumping into session 4, emerging heat pump technologies for the toughest challenges. I've had a great time interacting with everybody in the chat. We've had a really interactive chat so far, and we've seen a lot of questions which we'd like to address in this panel about all the different types of heat pumps. I know if you're familiar with NEEP, you probably know we deal a lot with air source heat pumps. There are other types of heat pumps available, which we're going to be jumping into. So without further ado, let's bring out our panelists. Welcome, everybody. Today joining us, we have Steve Nadell from ACEEE, Ari Greenberg from VRFs, and Matt Brunner from Train. And I will let you each introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about yourself, your organization, and the perspective you bring to the discussion today. Let's start with Steve.
Hi, so I'm the executive director at ACEEE, been in the energy efficiency field for 40 years or so, hard to believe. And we recently wrote a paper looking at commercial electrification opportunities. We've also done a lot of work on the residential sector, so I'll bring those perspectives.
Thank you, Steve. It's great to have you. How about Matt?
Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Brunner. I'm a ductless sales specialist with Train, and in my role, I work with Train's joint venture they have with Mitsubishi Electric, distributing VRF and commercial heat pumps. So basically my role, I'm focused on assisting in the design and application of ductless systems with engineers and contractors. In the past couple of years, it's really kind of transformed from VRF being a niche product that, you know, interested parties would get involved with to really kind of being at the forefront of this push for decarbonization and electrification. So really excited to be here today.
Thank you, Matt, and welcome, Ari.
Everyone, I'm Ari Greenberg. I am a member of the Sustainable Design and HVAC Engineering team at VRFs Consulting Engineers in Boston. I have the luxury of working on some of our best projects when it comes to electrification, and really our focus these days at VRFs is electrifying hard-to-heat buildings. So we're doing a lot of work with laboratories and healthcare and some of those buildings that we thought might be far in the future in terms of being able to electrify. So I'm excited today to offer some perspective on how we're heating those buildings, how we're applying different types of heat pumps, finding the right technology for the right application, and really getting to the crux of the issue of providing heat without fossil fuels.
Thank you, Ari. You brought up a great point, electrifying hard-to-heat buildings. That's exactly what we're here to talk about. Very first question for the panel, what are hard-to-heat buildings?
I'll jump right in here. So, I think hard-to-heat buildings are buildings where we've got, first and foremost, a lot of ventilation. Buildings where we've got the need to provide a lot of heat in a short amount of time. The challenges for a while have been healthcare, hospitals in particular, and laboratories where we've got 100% outside air systems. Another kind of nuanced category of hard-to-heat buildings, and I'm sure my fellow panelists will get into these as well, are some of our existing buildings where we didn't design around electrification 100 years ago. We might have some envelope challenges as well. So, our classical energy intense buildings, hospitals and life sciences or science and technology, and then also our aging and ailing building stock.
To his list, I would add high rises can be challenging because you need somewhere to locate a heat pump. I mean, high rises, particularly without adjacent land. I've heard some challenges in New York City. How many evaporators can you get on a New York City rooftop, as an example? That would be one. I'd say very cold climates is another challenge. Yes, you can get a lot of heat from a heat pump, but maybe not 100%. The colder it gets, the more challenging it gets. And I'd also note historic buildings can be challenging as well because you have to care very much about the aesthetics.
Yeah, I would just tack on to what Steve and Ari said. I think that, we have a unique challenge up here in the Northeast in that we have a lot of historic buildings, and we also have very cold climates that we have to heat these historic buildings in. And it's a challenge to kind of get from where we are to where we're going without necessarily the ability to add a lot of insulation, and also keeping in mind, the aesthetics and, what's already there.
That's interesting. I didn't hear homes as an answer. I understand we're focused on commercial here. We have had a lot of interest in residential in particular. What challenges would you say specific to residential do we face in the Northeast?
I can jump in. It really comes down to how do you get 100% of the heat? How do you distribute the heat? And the colder it gets, the more challenging. So if you're in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, it's much more challenging than if you're in, Bridgeport, Connecticut. I would also note that homes that have hot water or steam systems, currently there's a lack of good water-based heat pumps to plug into those. So you're generally now talking a series of mini splits, which can work, but it adds up the costs.
We'll get into this a lot over the course of the next hour to jump off of that. When we're talking about buildings that have existing water-based systems, hot water temperature becomes a big piece of this question. And historically, all buildings really, including homes, are designed off of hot water temperatures. And that's a current challenge for existing heat pump technologies, making warmer and water temperatures to plug into systems like hot water baseboards. So that's a challenging thing for a homeowner considering trying to upgrade their home. Less so a challenge for new home construction because we can design around it. But when we talk about heat pumps, a lot of time for residential, it happens often that heat pumps are a great solution to also add air conditioning, and that's where we're seeing in a lot of existing homes that heat pump systems are trying to do both at the same time.
Yeah, and I know a lot of homes up north that have made it years and years without ever having a need for air conditioning. This summer found themselves in dire need of some cold air in their house. So this winter they might find themselves with the surprise benefit of having a little bit of electrified heating and kind of taking them on the path towards that.
So let's dig into that challenge of an existing house or commercial building with a hydronic heating system. So folks who maybe not be technical can understand what really are the challenges. I know you've mentioned hot water temperature. Can we go a little bit into detail about what options are available to provide something with a bit lower hot water temperature? Are heat pumps able to do that? And what experience do you have retrofitting buildings with existing hydronic systems?
Sure. So to put some numbers into this discussion, a typical building even 20 years ago would have been designed with probably at 180 degree Fahrenheit hot water temperature, meaning water leaving the boiler going out to the building would be about 180 degrees. And that's the temperature that you would use to push heat out of baseboards or different coils and air handlers in your building. The types of heat pumps that we're looking at to electrify hot water heating in the commercial world, at the very least, prefer to operate somewhere around 120 degrees. And if you think about it, the fluid that's not as warm doesn't naturally give off as much heat as the 180-degree fluid. So we need to think carefully about the sizes of our pipes, the way our coils are designed, the way some of our radiant systems work or don't work at those temperatures. In-floor radiant happens to be a really great solution at that temperature. But yeah, so it's not always a plug and play solution when you have hydronics in an existing building. But we find too that if a building 20 years ago was designed for really warm water and a really bad envelope, that same building with some improvements to the enclosure might actually work just fine with the lower hot water temperature, even with the same system. So there's a little bit of experimentation there because we don't always have the ability to know exactly every piece of equipment in the building and how it'll perform at a different temperature, but there's certainly solutions to make do with existing systems and different water temperatures.
And I just add, there are some systems of the commercial that can get a bit higher. There are double pass systems that basically run it through twice. I've heard of getting up to 160. There are some new refrigerants, CO2 or others that you can do higher. Some of these are starting to be used in industrial heat pumps, but these are emerging technologies. They're barely making into commercial and are not yet out there for residential. And they're going to be both more expensive, and there is an efficiency penalty the higher you try to drive that distribution air or water temperature.
That's a great point. So, what a lot of people think of these days when we say heat pump, I think the first thing that often comes to mind, we think of a mini split heat pump, which is an air source heat pump, what we technically refer to as air to air, meaning the source is air and where we're delivering the heat is air. So we're pulling energy from the outside environment and delivering it into a building or a home. We actually have a nice little graphic that we'll post to the chat that kind of disambiguates these different types of heat pumps. But when we think of having air as a source or the ground as a source, ground source often synonymous with water source because we're really circulating fluid through the ground. We don't literally bring the ground up to the surface. And then the point of delivery is either air again or water. So air to air heat pumps, air to water, water to air, and water to water. 4 different ways to deliver heat using a refrigeration cycle, a heat pump into a building. And each one marries to the various conditions, various needs of the building and the various needs of the site that surround the building.
Ari, thanks very much. And you said the magic word of you began talking about air source. And for anybody not as technical, it's interesting to hear that there are 4 different combinations. I'd like to dig into each one of those. So we were going to try to post that graphic in the chat, but it turns out that it's best if we display it and are able to speak to it. So if we can put that graphic back up one more time, it would be interesting to go through the different categories. Thanks very much, and great to see it full screen. Air to air in the upper left-hand corner is what we're most familiar with. And in the chat earlier, we were bringing up challenges, or some audience members brought up challenges in really cold climates, or if the snow is literally piled up above the outdoor unit, what are you going to do? And so that allows you to look at some of these other systems that involve using water as the medium that you're either absorbing or rejecting the heat to. And to tie this all together, we heard from Dandelion a little bit earlier about water to water, or actually, I believe that would have been water to air is what they currently offer. If you recall the picture of the unit in the basement, which connects a water loop out into the ground, and from there, it connects to normal ductwork like you're used to. So that would be an example of a water to air system. Let me ask Ari to jump back in. Can you tell us a little bit about some of these other systems, particularly water to water and air to water, and maybe some systems that people are really not familiar with and that count towards our goal today of talking about some of the emerging heat pump solutions that folks might not be as familiar with?
Sure. So water to water is a great way to use ground source heat pumps or geothermal heat pumps to heat a building or also to cool a building that uses hydronic distribution, so water distributed around the building instead of air for heating and cooling. So you see this mostly in larger commercial buildings, sometimes in very high-end homes, but it's more common to see in a commercial or institutional application where we have hot water and chilled water distributed in the building. But at the end of the day, the working fluid, really what's doing the magic for us is groundwater, whether it's an open loop or more commonly these days a closed loop, meaning we're circulating a fluid through the ground. And whether we put it into ductwork with a water to air heat pump or put it into hot water and chilled water with water to water, we're really achieving the same goal there.
Thanks, Ari. Can I ask Matt to chime in on how it would look with a VRF system, just as a basis of comparison that doesn't use water at all?
Sure. So, I mean, VRF is typically
Sorry, did we have Matt freeze? Okay. Hopefully we get Matt back soon. Same question to Ari. Would you mind explaining how a VRF system would be laid out compared
Sure,
to?
and hopefully I can say what Matt would have said as eloquently. I think folks are most familiar with VRF as an air source piece of equipment, but if you take the heat sink and run it across a water heat exchanger, we've actually done projects that are VRF ground source, so that it's actually a very compact solution. That heat exchanger, the heat pump portion, can live in a closet. It would be about the size of a washing machine. And then we distribute heating and cooling to different zones in the building with small refrigerant pipes. It's more or less similar to how we would distribute with water, but we're distributing with refrigerant in a heat pump cycle. So VRF is, you've seen it more often with air source. You'll see it outside of a building, and you can see the little, units. They look a little bit like astronauts, so I think. But you can also locate those in a building and run water through them and achieve the same goal.
Thanks, Ari.
Matt's back. You can add.
Guys, I'm back.
Thank you, Ari. Thanks
Sorry
for
about that.
Matt. Welcome back. Sorry you froze. Glad to have you back. So Ari was explaining.
Yeah.
He didn't just freeze again, did he? Or did I freeze? Who's frozen?
No, Pete froze, unfortunately.
I'm frozen. Now he's moving.
Am I good? Good for you guys?
We're good, Matt.
All right.
Matt, I'll throw one to you. A question. We just spoke about the VRF system is able to have refrigerant piping running all through the building. Do you have a solution where you actually use a VRF system with water piping running all through the building?
Yeah, so there's a couple of applications that we have in the works for that. One that's existing is it's called a hex kit, so heat exchanger kit. And essentially what that does is instead of your typical indoor unit, you have, that would be, your refrigerant transferring to air, you have your refrigerant transferring to water, a heat exchanger, and then essentially transferring that heat from that point to, a radiator existing sort of distribution. So we have two versions of it. We have a version that's heating and cooling, and that will get you to about 120 degrees. But then there's actually a version called a booster unit that actually has an additional compressor in it, and that's capable of delivering water temperatures up to 160 degrees to the space. So I know we have some projects in the works locally right now where it's like old mill buildings where they want to reuse their existing hydronic piping, and basically the VRF condensing unit is connected to these hex kits, and so then you can reuse your existing piping without nearly as much refrigerant piping and less impact to the existing building. And then another version of product that we're coming out with is called hybrid VRF. And what hybrid VRF is you use your same VRF condensing unit, but in your branch controller, which is a distribution box that kind of is central in the space, you're transferring from refrigerant to water. So you're actually connecting water piping to your indoor units and delivering, again, instead of refrigerant to the air, water to air to the space. And there's a number of reasons why you would do this: less refrigerant total use, which is also part of decarb goals. Cheaper install for water piping. And yeah, that's coming out next year and that'll be really great.
That's great to hear. And just to loop us back to our original question about addressing existing hydronic systems, it sounds to me like there are, in fact, solutions that heat pumps can provide to reuse your existing hydronic, if not the piping itself, but maybe even the heat exchangers. If you're able, it sounds like, just to summarize, if you're able to weatherize first, you might not need as hot a temperature in the pipes after all, and then you'd be able to get away with the heat pump. So to bring it up a little bit to a higher level, what types of systems are you seeing kind of proportionally? Are you seeing overall the slices of the pie? Would it be a lot of VRF? Would it be a lot of water source heat pumps? How does it really break down when you think of electrifying the existing building stock? And I'll ask that one to Steve first. He might have some background on that.
The vast majority of buildings, we're still seeing, if they have air conditioning, and it's usually ducted, in more than half the space, commercial space, and certainly in homes, it's virtually all of them. They're going with some type of air-to-air heat pump. Obviously, as you get into commercial, if you are talking water source heat pumps, water source systems, you then start getting into these water source things. But I think it's something like 60% of even commercial buildings have air distribution, not water distribution in the baseline. The one other thing I wanted to throw out, you mentioned snow. One very obvious thing is make sure that your outdoor unit is above the snow line. Don't stick it on the ground if you're in Vermont.
Very important.
That's a great point. Sorry, Matt, were you about to speak?
No, just agreeing with Steve. It's really important to keep your unit out of the snow.
For sure.
As Steve mentioned, I would venture to guess that more than 50% of our existing commercial building stock uses air as a way to cool and by and large heat. But you can actually use a VRF system to retrofit a unit like that. For example, a rooftop unit providing air conditioning can be retrofitted with essentially a refrigerant coil from a VRF system. And that's a really kind of quick and effective solution to convert, say, a gas-fired DX air handler to something that's more efficient in heating and cooling and doesn't burn the fossil fuels. So that's a really interesting way of conversion. I kind of want to reiterate that I think that the costs of, at least at large scale, the costs of drilling geothermal wells can be heavy, and I think there's probably little argument that ground source heat pumps are very, very efficient in terms of the energy input it takes to run them. But from a cost perspective, from a heat pumps for the masses perspective, I think air source technologies offer a lot of promise and excitement these days, that they're getting more efficient, working at lower temperatures, and able to do what we need without drilling down. So as much as I would love to say that I wish we could all afford ground source systems, I think the reality is that we're going to see a lot of air source systems coming online in the near future.
And I just wanted to pick up on what Ari said, use of VRF instead of your classic rooftop system. Done some very good work in Oregon, and I know NYSERDA is starting to do this as well. They're getting like 40+% energy use reductions, high efficiency systems, if well engineered.
That's very interesting. I would just like to ask, how do you think that compares to replacing the rooftop with heat pump rooftop? I've heard a lot of talk about heat pump rooftops and not quite as much about actually replacing the heat exchanger in the rooftop with the VRF coil. Any comments from anyone on comparing those two options?
Ari, do you want to take it? If not, I can add a little, but you probably have more expertise.
Well, maybe I'll let you take it because fundamentally, from my perspective, there's not a huge difference. You're still, it's a refrigeration cycle and a refrigerant coil in the unit. So I suppose, Steve, go ahead and
okay.
Add to that.
What they've been doing in Oregon and what New York is doing is they are replacing the whole system. So they're adding a separate fresh air system and saving a lot of fan energy use from moving lots of air through ducts. They are also taking advantage of the fact that VRFs can be a bit more efficient than your classic rooftop system by a little. So that's something else that they're doing.
Right. So that's a good point of clarification that VRF systems can be used to heat spaces on a space by space basis, not just to heat air at a central level. So what we're often seeing, or a great retrofit solution for an existing building, is to convert what the existing air delivery system used to be, a recirc system moving a lot of air through the building, repurpose that ductwork to just provide the fresh air that the building needs. And then if we do our heating and cooling at the zone level, we save a lot of fan energy. And we also save on the kind of elephant in the room, which is reheat, right? In a traditional air handling system, in even small commercial buildings, we cool a lot of air to blow it around the building, and then we heat it right back up because it's overcooling the space. So if you deliver just a little bit of air, you have a lot less of that unnecessary cooling, and therefore a lot less of that unnecessary reheat. So it's about right sizing that, letting the air do what it does best, which is ventilation, and letting the heat pump or a fluid do what it does best, which is heating and cooling.
Ari, that's an excellent point. And I just want to summarize for everybody just the idea of separating the cooling load from the ventilation load. Because if you imagine the problem you're running into in the summer, you've cooled down all this air and you're just dumping it outside the building. And in the winter, you've heated up all this air and you're just dumping it outside the building. So that really leads us into, maybe we could talk a little bit about energy recovery. Obviously, you don't want to cool down or heat up or rather you want to cool down or heat up as little as air as possible. And then when you do exhaust it, you can actually recover the energy from it. So what interesting new technologies have you run into for energy recovery?
So a really promising space right now is something that we call exhaust source heat pump. Typically we try to recover as much heat as we can from the exhaust air streams in a new building. Passively, we might have an enthalpy wheel, or we might have a passive heat exchanger, and it can pull some heat out. But that the quality of that heat, right, is what we would call low grade heat, not a high temperature, and not as useful to heat the building. But if you think about it, the exhaust air leaving a building is always warmer than the outside air. So that's a really great place to pick up heat for your building. So there's a lot of ways that we actually can do that, but by and large, we're going to put some sort of coil in the exhaust air stream that's connected to a heat pump. And it, in essence, works like an air source heat pump. The air moving over it is exhaust air, and then it can provide heat in the building. So like I said, a few ways to do that, but a really promising source. The idea here is to insulate buildings very well and recover every single bit of energy that we put into the air before it leaves the building. And you'd be surprised, there's not much heat left that you need to provide in the building once you've done those two things correctly.
I just note in general, to the extent you can have a heat source that is warmer than the outside air, the efficiency is much better, and usually you can get hotter temperatures. So whether that's a ground loop, it's exhaust air, people have taken creative things, coming off of if there's a water heater or something like that, whatever it is. I even heard of one system where they went out into the street and are using the sewer system out in the street as their heat sink. I'm just using that as an example to get creative. The warmer that source is, the better you will be in terms of the operations of the system.
There's a really cool emerging technology called, I'll use a brand name, it's called Shark. It's a wastewater heat pump that is able to exactly leverage the heat that's in our gray water systems in a building and turn that into useful heat inside. It's no surprise that you see a lot of heat pump manufacturers that are also in the energy recovery space. So VRF manufacturers oftentimes will make an ERV, an energy recovery ventilator, to package along with their products. And that's for a few reasons. One is if we're talking about air sealing homes to make heat pumps more efficient, we also start talking about the need for mechanical ventilation in homes. When we're making them tighter, we also want to make them fresher. So, I think that's a really exciting opportunity to tackle indoor air quality and electrification at the same time.
That's really interesting, bringing up indoor air quality as well. I know is a big issue. I'm curious how big an issue you think it is for residential buildings. I know typically we think of commercial buildings where there's mandated levels of ventilation, not quite maybe as much. You don't hear about it quite as much for a house. When you start getting into something like passive house certification or a very tight building envelope, how many houses, I'm just trying to get an idea of the scale of this, would need some type of ventilation system?
Well, from a passive house perspective, every building, part of the passive house standard. So, in a residential application, the thought process is to exhaust air from the parts of our home that are less clean or might contain more particulate. So kitchen where we're cooking is a great example, bathrooms as well. And to provide fresh air to the spaces where we live, so living rooms and bedrooms. So there's that constant exchange of air that's really important. But as we know, if we're bringing in cold air when we don't want to, that can be an energy penalty. So we always want to use an ERV to exchange heat between those air streams before they do what they, before they go to their final destination.
And the broader answer to your question is it varies enormously from region to region. But, heat recovery ventilator, it's not uncommon in commercial buildings. It's pretty rare in residential, although the farther north you go, the more likely. And I know in Vermont, for example, they've done a bit more. There's some interesting history going back, but there's been a lot of work there. By the founders of VEIC, before they formed VEIC, had an heat recovery ventilator company.
We did have a question from the audience come in for Ari about the previous topic of the exhaust air heat pump. Is that possible to retrofit? Maybe if you had an existing air handler, I'm trying to think how it would work. It would have to be a perfect situation where you had the exhaust air in line with the air coming in. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's not impossible. There's a lot of engineering that go into a system like that, and calculations of how much heat would come out of it. But yeah, theoretically, in most buildings, there's some sort of form of exhaust or relief air, because if we're bringing in fresh air, we're oftentimes rejecting exhaust. So even we've in my experience, our work, we've started doing these with some of the more problematic airstreams in the building where traditional forms of energy recovery aren't applicable. So a great example is in a lab building, fume hood exhaust. That oftentimes we can't risk mixing those air streams with our fresh air streams, but we can certainly put a refrigerant or hydronic water coil into an airstream like that and attach it to a heat pump to provide heat in the building. Absolutely no risk of contaminating that water with the fume hood exhaust air. So we're starting, this is definitely the bleeding edge of emerging technology when we're starting to mix and match these technologies. But the fundamental principle, as I mentioned before, is that we've got a source of heat that's leaving the building, and we want to interrupt it or intercept it on its way out.
That's great to hear. And just overall, my thought is we have so many great options we're discussing here for electrification. A question I'd like to move to is, what objections are you hearing in your all's capacity and your all's careers? What objections are you hearing to electrification, and how can we overcome them? I'll start with Ari.
Cost of energy costs, I would say, is a big one. We can't dance around the fact that electricity is more expensive than natural gas until our legislators do something about that. That it's, at least when it's very, very cold and the COP of a heat pump drops, it can be more expensive to heat that way. The economics change when your fuel source isn't natural gas. And change when it's warmer, and heat pumps are really, really efficient. But in very, very cold climates, I think there's a challenge to switch to electricity if it's, costing 22 cents the kilowatt hour for a homeowner up here.
Cost. Jump in.
Sorry, go for it, Steve. What are your thoughts?
Okay, yes, it's costs. There's a desire for backup heat just to be safe in warmer climates, as in the southern end of the NEEP territory. It may well not be needed. We have to educate people about that, but in the far north, in an existing home or building, you probably do need some type of backup. New construction, you can build it efficiently enough without, so that would be one. Ari mentioned the cost. Yes, electricity tends to be more expensive. Do we start offering special rates for people who switch over, particularly for low, moderate income? Do we think about a price on carbon to better equate the cost the other way and use some of that income to help low, moderate income people in particular? But another concern is by gas utilities who invested many billions of dollars in their network, and they're worried that they will become inadequately used to support the costs. And who's going to deal with the undepreciated cost of that? And there's creative ways to basically finance that, if you will, over a series of years, just like many times we're doing that with coal power plants. But we're going to need to have agreements on how ultimately we phase out gas distribution networks in certain areas. In dense areas, there's probably enough of a need for industrial or commercial, but in rural areas, it may not be sustainable to continue a gas distribution network. And we're going to have to deal with the economics of that.
There's an interesting, something that we've run into a lot in our work lately when we're doing highly electrified buildings that have some sort of mission critical component and require a second source of fuel, and that's typically natural gas. But when you're ready to hook up to a public utility and you tell them that the gas is really only a backup source, it becomes a challenge to finance an asset like natural gas infrastructure when you don't intend to actually be a customer purchasing fuel from that utility. So that's a big challenge at the moment. I was excited to hear about some work being done in the UK of repurposing natural gas infrastructure to distribute at least a mixture of hydrogen, for example, in a neighborhood. So I think that's an interesting space. I don't imagine that's going to be happening here very soon, but there are potentially some creative ways to repurpose that infrastructure.
Right. I would just add hydrogen can maybe go up to 15% with the natural gas. You can't get too high, or else you start having problems with embrittled pipes and other things like that.
Matt, your thoughts on objections or challenges for electrification?
Yeah, it's always going to be cheaper to do nothing, which I think is something that we run into a lot. Just somebody wants to look at a project and they see the price tag and might as well stick with what you got. I think there are, options for, helping with the costs. Performance contracting is a pretty popular option in the commercial space, whereas you actually pay for the project with the future savings. I don't know if there's anything in the works to have that happen more of a residential sphere. And then, kind of the other issues that were talked about, worries about efficiency in cold weather. Am I going to be paying through the nose if I'm in the White Mountains and it's, negative 10 degrees out? And, will I get enough heat? And I think a lot of those issues have been addressed by, kind of newer products that are better suited for these climates than where they originally came from. And it's a lot of just, education and kind of correcting the perception and improving the performance that we have today.
I think perception's a big one. The four of us here on this panel can sing from the rooftops about how great heat pumps work, but there's still folks who, the common thing you always hear the comment that wasn't electricity made from fossil fuels still anyway, right? I can say unequivocally that if you factor in the COP of a heat pump on a moderately renewable grid, even for example ours in New England, that the carbon equation is already 50% lower than burning gas in a furnace or boiler. But that's a common misconception. And the other common misconception that Matt's probably run into before is the idea that heat pumps don't work well when it starts to get cold, because that's with today's technology is just frankly not true anymore. They work harder, but they still work.
Right, but they got a bad reputation in the 50s or so, and it's hard to unlearn that. The other thing that is somewhat legitimate, heat pumps tend to produce lower temperature air than, say, a furnace. And if it blows on you, that moving air can feel uncomfortable. So ideally, you locate the registers away from people's favorite sitting places, et cetera, so they don't get this 110, 120 degree air blowing at them. It's still heating the room, but it may feel cool, particularly if you're used to 140 degree air.
That's a good point. That lower temperature air is also not as great at compensating for drafty buildings as the really hot air was. So that's when we talk about thermal comfort and air sealing, those are all important pieces of making heat pumps work well.
Right. If you're going to install a heat pump in New York, New England, if at all possible, make sure your house is pretty well weatherized. That will really help both comfort and your bills.
That's great to hear some of those misconceptions and putting some of those to rest. Thank you for that. We do have a pertinent audience question. What do you see as the biggest driver in electrification of commercial buildings, given that people are weighing all these options? What actually is moving people towards electrification? Is it laws and regulations? Is it return on investment? Is it building owners coming to you with the desire to be green? What do you see as the big drivers in commercial building electrification?
I think it comes from a lot of directions.
I think the one where it probably doesn't come from the most, which is surprising, is building owners wanting to be green. I think in the residential space, that's probably true. In the commercial space, all but most commercial owners will do it because it makes financial sense, or because they have to from a regulatory perspective. So we're seeing lately huge push at the state and local level to electrify buildings, but also there's to some extent, at least in the commercial developer world, a need for a high performance product. So we're seeing commercial or corporate entities that have carbon reduction goals setting a demand for low carbon building stock. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach, but by and large, it's money talks. It's being driven by what the financials tell people to do.
And just to add that, I am hearing some interest driven by consumers, but it's very publicly minded ones. It's governments, local and state. It's maybe corporate headquarters where they like having something nice and showy on their commitment. Beyond that, Ari's absolutely right. It's economics strictly. The other thing I'm hearing, though, is in those jurisdictions that are having building performance standards, people are thinking a lot more. I've heard from a number of manufacturers about a lot more interest in Boston and New York City, where there are building performance standards, and they know they're going to ramp down eventually to zero carbon. And if your existing system gets replaced every 20 years, they are factoring that into their next replacement. So I've heard about more demand in those places.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that, with the timeline of how long these building systems last, and if we're trying to, in Boston, get to, 100% renewable by 2050, kind of the time is now to start getting that going.
A new building today is an existing building tomorrow, and it's then subject to New York Local Law 97.
Which is a New York City building performance standard for those who don't know.
So it's a important piece of compliance with those programs that if you're doing something now, it might as well be electrified because it's going to be a lot harder to do it again in the future.
So one thing I'm hearing that's interestingly absent from driving electrification is rebates. I don't believe we've talked about rebates yet. In your all's experience, how do you use rebates in the sales cycle? How beneficial are they? How big a deal are they? I mean, we didn't mention them. Just think it's the interesting that we haven't brought them up yet. So what are your all's thoughts?
It's a little bit tougher to talk because it is a state to state. It's very different. We're trying to kind of come up with a cohesive picture at Train, at least in the Northeast. It's very different from state to state, but most governments are setting aside pretty large sums now. In Massachusetts, specifically with Mass Save, there's upstream rebates that us at Train we can submit for in projects to kind of pay off some of the project costs, and it can be pretty significant, up to $250 a ton, I think, for some VRF projects. But it's definitely moving forward, and there's going to be more of it, I think, as we, the next couple of years.
In my experience, in the commercial world, incentives are more or less the icing on the cake. We try to make a project cost effective and financially viable even without the incentives, and the incentive is a bonus. I would say in the residential world, even from personal experience, there are some good incentives for adding heat pumps to homes, but those are particularly effective if you've got the cash to do it in the first place. So I think that it doesn't quite address the low to moderate income equation of being able to install products in the first place. And there are some financial mechanisms, loans, for example, that can help there. But incentives are probably not by themselves going to get us to a fully electrified future.
I agree. I was about to use the same phrase, icing on the cake. The one thing I'd note for residential, the budget reconciliation bill that just got released a couple of hours ago does include a significant amount of money. I've been on this thing, so I haven't made a look at the exact details of the final number, somewhere around $9 billion for residential electrification measures, including particularly higher incentives for low moderate income. So that will help quite a bit, particularly if the states, localities, utilities fill in around that, particularly for low moderate income, because it won't cover the full cost. And I'm not clear, again, I haven't had a chance to look at it. I'm hoping that they've adequately incentivized cold climate heat pumps, because up in New England, you want cold climate heat pumps, not a warm climate heat pump, or else you're going to have some comfort and performance problems.
I appreciate you saying rebates are the icing on the cake. I think many of us in the energy efficiency sphere have higher aspirations for rebates than simply being icing on the cake, and hope that they can lead and assist in market transformation. What do you see as the issues? Is it difficulty getting rebates? Is it difficulty with the myriad programs that exist for energy rebates? And I love being able to ask this directly to you all who have experience in the actual sales process. What could be done better, or what challenges do you face actually getting the rebates?
I think a good point that was brought up already a couple times is that, with it being icing on the cake, you're really not incentivizing, low income housing projects. If the capital isn't already there, it's kind of hard to get these electrification projects done. So I think if there's more of a cohesive program to, help get the projects rolling, that'd be really helpful to us, because now we kind of have to seek them out ourselves.
I'd add a couple of thoughts. One, you need the contractors fully on board. They have to be educated. They have to be comfortable. I was on listening to another presentation earlier today at the MBI Getting to Zero conference, and it was noted that in Maine, they have over 1,000 contractors involved in their heat pump program. They've really built it up, whereas New York State, who is also on it, they only have 480, despite the fact that there's a hell of a lot more people in New York. So as the person from New York noted, they really have to build up the contractor base. Maine has finally gotten to that point. The Northwest has, but we have to build up that contractor base. The other thing I note is, as Ari said, we do have the operating cost. You want the heat pump to cost no more than the natural gas system. And that can be challenging depending on prices. Weatherization helps, but it's hard to sell something if the operating costs go up. Most consumers are looking for a relatively rapid payback. They don't do discounted life cycle cost analysis, say, oh, wow, this is going to save me $500 over 20 years. They just say, is it a 1, 2, 3 year payback? And a lot of these are not. There are some replacing an oil water heater with a heat pump water heater. Sometimes it's less expensive right off the bat, but a lot of them, it's longer paybacks, which means, both education, but also creative financing and things like that.
There's an interesting space now with what's called on-bill financing. So the ability to finance, and Matt alluded to this too, it's common in New York with ESCOs to finance a project with its savings, but you do still need the capital up front coming from somewhere to finance the project in the first place. But depending on the climate, if you're saving money on your bills by installing this, I think the mechanism for repaying is there.
We do have an interesting audience question I'd like to make sure we get to. This one, interesting question. To what degree could natural gas distribution systems be used for geothermal district heating in urban environments? So I'm imagining reusing the gas pipelines as water pipelines. Any thoughts on the possibility of using the gas infrastructure for geothermal heating?
Interesting, but definitely an interesting question. I haven't personally heard of that being done or being thought of yet, but I think one particular challenge is that often our geothermal systems, ground source systems, are closed loop, meaning that if we receive water, we also send it back. So you need 2 pipes. So maybe we're halfway there.
Yes, you don't want to put this lukewarm water just down the drain. 1, you're wasting energy. 2, I'm not sure the sewage system would appreciate it.
Well, so we're hearing from our chat right now that National Grid and Eversource are actually piloting this possibility. So I had never heard of it, and it sounds like it's striking us as a new possibility, but would be great to be able to hear more about that. And if anybody can share links in the chat, we'd love to see what information you all have seen. And I would like to remind everybody that we are not actually able to see the chat. We're only able to see the Q&A from our NEEP behind the scenes technical support is submitting to our panel the questions that you ask in Q&A. So as we get close to the end, we have maybe 5 minutes left. Any pressing questions you have, please ask in the Q&A, and definitely continue to have great conversation in the chat. I guess I would like to ask if you could remove one policy obstacle, what would it be?
If I could do one thing, I'd probably think about putting a price on carbon to help the economics of electrification and decarbonization better match what the consumers and businesses see as they're making decisions.
I think to add to that, and this is to some extent already happening, but I think we need to do a better job to no longer incentivize fossil fuels, even efficient forms of fossil fuel heating, to disincentivize those to move towards heat pumps. Because if we're incentivizing condensing boilers the same way we're incentivizing heat pumps, then we're not doing what we need.
Yeah, today it still feels like it's kind of optional, right, for a building owner, a consumer to go electric. And I think we really need to start this journey today, because we're not just going to find ourselves there in 20 years if we don't start today.
Those are all good ones. One thought that came up previously, I'm not sure if it was earlier today or yesterday, is stop incentivizing air conditioning systems and rather incentivize heat pumps, so that when you do come to the end of life of an air conditioner, you are much more financially incentivized to get a heat pump.
Yeah, no, I agree. And my understanding is Massachusetts, as part of discussions on the next plan, is thinking of moving in that direction. But yeah, when that central air conditioner needs to be replaced, install a heat pump. Even if it's not a cold climate heat pump, you're still going to get heat, down to roughly freezing, and that could be quite useful. And the warmer the temperature is and above freezing, the performance is even that much better. So you get that much more heat at a higher efficiency.
Yeah, and just to clarify, as far as mini splits are concerned, it's really no different equipment and very little additional cost at all, if any, to have an air conditioning only unit versus a heat pump unit. So those units are designed to do both and do both equally well.
So in the title of our panel discussion today is Emerging Heat Pump Solutions. And I think about this a lot in my role at NEEP. We always talk about how they are emerging solutions and it's nascent technology and we need a market transformation. And we talk about the adoption curve. So where do you all feel that we are on the adoption curve for building electrification?
I feel like we're just getting started. I mean, I work with VRF, which I feel like is a little bit more mature on the electrification side of things relative to some of the new technologies that are coming out. And I think it's really exciting what's next.
I'll go a step farther and say we're beyond just getting started when it comes to ductless heat pumps, VRF. We're starting to get significant market share with those. Where we are just getting started is replacements for ducted air conditioners, as well as commercial buildings that might not use VRF. That one we need a lot more work on.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we are just getting started, particularly, for example, with hydronic heat pump systems. So air to water heat pumps, for example, just getting started, but I'm quite optimistic in seeing a pretty rapid adoption in that space. So I think that's why I said at the beginning, it's a really exciting time to see the rapid deployment of larger scale commercial heat pump solutions. We're even seeing in our work district scale heat pump solutions, right? So folks installing heat pumps at a central plant level to distribute it to an entire campus worth of buildings. in lieu of, historically providing steam, for example, in a nice old-fashioned New England university. We can provide low-temp hot water with the heat pump, and I think the institutions often lead the way, but we're seeing the commercial space, quickly at their heels.
That's great to hear. That's a very exciting time, no matter where you are on the curve. It sounds like we're at the beginning and ramping up, and maybe we'll be there for a while as we remove policy obstacles, any other barriers, as we address the financial concerns, everything we've discussed today. Just to wrap things up, I think this has been a fantastic conversation. I've really enjoyed talking with you all. I hope this has been beneficial to everyone who's joined us in the audience, and I've really enjoyed the active chat and everyone's involvement, and hopefully we can do this again next year. I will not be reporting live from my basement. Hopefully I will be in person. So thank you to everyone, and I believe we will be welcoming back Dave Liss.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Great work, Ben. I really enjoyed that last panel. A lot of good perspectives from the crowd, and I could tell it was right up your alley. So I appreciated the panel. What I know you had 10 seconds to reflect on it, but how did it go? Did it go as you expected?
It did. So we had an interesting tech session. We actually had a bit of a dress rehearsal to kind of decide the topics we were going to address. And it was really interesting to see how it changed, especially with some of the audience participation and being able to dive a little bit more deeply into the system types. We were able to prepare that slide, which I hope can be shared, or when we send out the recording of this, to be able to see those 4 types of systems so that people can understand that, like Ari was saying at the end, we're really at the beginning of the adoption curve for hydronic systems. Matt was saying things are rocking and rolling with VRF systems. So I think it's great to hear all the progress.
Yeah, I thought it was a good session to end on. I know we talked a lot about some of the applications that are, let's say, on a little bit more mature in some of the earlier sessions, and it was it was encouraging to talk about some of the more challenging solutions not being quite as far away as I think we think they are. So so I really appreciated that, and nice work. I think it's my turn to start to wrap up and say our thank yous. So I'll see you in the green room, Ben.
Thanks, Dave.
So first of all, big thanks to the NEEP team that helped make this possible. A lot of the organization was involved, so really proud of the team for pulling this all together. I thought the production and the diversity of format was really interesting, and hopefully provided an interesting workshop for everybody. I mean, I do think it would be great to see everybody next year in person. So still fingers crossed, but this is a great alternative. For folks that are interested in being part of our ongoing work, we, as you probably understand now, we have an initiative that brings stakeholders, a wide variety of stakeholders together to work on market transformation strategies in a collaborative way. And that initiative is made possible through our subscription program. So if you do want to be more involved in regular working group meetings and informing some of the tools and resources that we develop, please do reach out to me and the team. Anybody at NEEP can get you in touch with the initiative. And for folks that are subscribers, probably a heads up that we will be reaching out with more information about 2022 subscription shortly. Thanks to the speakers, everybody, for putting so much time into preparing, and I thought just fantastic panelists and speakers, and the sound bites were excellent. And obviously I'm not going to forget our funders and our state partners and the Allies Network who provide general funding to make this possible. And one last big thank you to our lead event sponsors, Daikin, Mitsubishi, Trane, Carrier, Connecticut Deep, and supporting sponsors Fujitsu and Abode for the fantastic support for the event and our work in general. With that, I'll just say thanks to everybody for joining. And I know a lot of you are doing work that's, making this market transformation possible. So keep up the good work, and we will see you in the initiative or through our workshop next year. So signing off. Thank you all so much.